So Brian, you love animals. You love to sort of take care of them, be around them. What is your job here at the Academy of Sciences?
Well, I work with a variety of different animals here at the Academy, including Claude. I actually just did a little bit of a Claude feeding just a few minutes ago. And then I also work with a lot of our amphibians, mostly frogs here at the Academy. And that's really kind of my personal passion. I really do like working with frogs a lot, frogs from all over the world.
Oh, wow. Does anyone like frogs? Anyone ever maybe picked up a frog or seen a frog out in the wild? They're really cool animals, definitely. Well, you said that was your passion. How did you get into studying frogs? What pathway did you take to get here?
Well, I've always really liked animals, and when I was younger, I started having animals as pets, including some frogs and toads and turtles and things like that. And then I was able to get a job at the National Aquarium in Baltimore, where I worked for a little bit over a year, and then did some work in the field as well. And then just about 5 years ago, I started here at the Academy working with our living collection here.
Very cool. And we have some great pictures of you doing your job. This one intrigued me. So you do like frogs, but you also like reptiles. And this is quite a venomous snake, right?
Yeah, that's our eastern diamondback rattlesnake. We were getting ready to actually do a physical on that guy, so we had to put him in a tube so that his head was immobilized so that we could take blood.
Wow, that sounds like it would get my blood pumping. Does anyone here like snakes?
Yeah, snakes are cool, right?
Snakes
Everybody?
are pretty cool.
Yeah.
We have a really cool snapping turtle right over there. Mm-hmm. And so you do physicals on all these animals to make sure they're healthy. Do we also give them medication sometimes if they need it?
Occasionally we do. For the most part, our animals are pretty healthy, so we don't have to intervene that way. But occasionally, if somebody has a scratch or something that's not healing properly or something like that, we might have to give it antibiotics. So we do have to sometimes handle the animals or immobilize them for that.
And you guys will see a lot of frogs here today. Where in the aquarium do we keep most of our frogs?
A big portion of the frogs in our collection are in the rainforest, so the big glass ball that's kind of over there. And then we also have a few in the water planet as well.
All right, and we have some cool pictures here of frogs. What role do frogs play? What kind of animal is a frog?
Well, frogs are amphibian, and they actually play a fairly significant role in the ecosystems. Not only are they food, but they also eat a lot of bugs and things, including bugs that are pest species like mosquitoes.
Oh, does anyone here like eating mosquitoes? Oh.
One person loves eating mosquitoes.
So it's definitely good to have frogs around eating all of those pests. Where would we go to find frogs?
Well, frogs are found on every continent except for Antarctica. We have frogs here in California, and there's a lot of frogs in tropical areas. That's where the biggest diversity of frogs is in tropics.
And you've actually gone out on collecting trips to go find a lot of these frogs. Where are some of the places you've been, and what are some of the methods that you use?
Well, yeah, we've been able to go on one collecting trip to Costa Rica. We did that about 2 years ago, and we were able to go down there, work with guides to go into various areas and collect animals for exhibit here at the Academy. This photo over here is just we went out into this area. There's a degraded area, and to catch these little red frogs. And basically what we did was we caught, I don't know, probably 50 or 60 in about a half an hour. We had them in bags in various containers, and then we just sexed them and brought back pairs. We only brought back 3 pairs of these guys.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a great job. Raise your hand if you'd want to go out and collect frogs out in the environment. That does sound really fun to me. And I do know that some of our frogs in our collections comes from this way, but how much of our collection comes from you actually breeding frogs or any aquariums breeding frogs? Yeah,
the majority of our collection at this point does come from us breeding them in captivity. So when we go on a trip like the Costa Rica trip, the goal is to bring back pairs so that we can get them to breed in captivity so that we don't have to go back out into the environment and collect more. And with our Costa Rica species, we've been able to breed the majority of the species that we brought back from Costa Rica, including this really cool glass frog, and then this hyalid frog.
Wow.
As well.
And it looks to me like there's quite a wide variety of frogs just out there in the world. What colors are pretty average on frogs? Do you see lots of reds, lots of yellows?
Yeah, the majority of frogs are actually fairly camouflage in colors. They tend to be more brownish, and a lot of greens, things like that. Yeah, that's kind of a pretty typical color scheme for a frog. And then we have a green here. Tree frogs tend to be kind of greenish. And then occasionally you get frogs that are brightly colored. This is the daytime coloration of one of the frog species that we actually have here at the Academy that you can see in the rainforest. And it's brightly colored. These guys will sleep under leaves, so you wouldn't really normally see them. But if you flip that leaf over, you see this bright flash of yellow, and then usually the frog jumps away. So the color is kind of like distracting, and then it hops away.
Oh, and I do know that color has other purposes as well. Is this a poisonous frog?
Yeah, this is a poisonous species from South America. That species is called Dendrobates tinctorius.
That sounds like a cool name. Dendrobates. Can you guys say that? Dendrobates tinctorius? No, he's like, no, I can't say that one. That's a pretty cool name. And frogs have an interesting way of reproducing. In fact, not all frogs reproduce in the same way. Does anybody want to take a guess? What are these? Grapes? They look like grapes, don't they? What did you guess? Eggs. Are these eggs, Brian, or are these grapes?
Yeah, those actually are eggs from this frog right here. That's the male. It's a glass frog. And these guys will lay their eggs on leaves above streams, which sounds a little bit strange because when we think of frogs, usually we think of frogs laying their eggs in water, right? In the tropics, however, a lot of frogs have evolved the ability to be able to lay their eggs outside of water, and that allows their eggs to be safe from aquatic predators like fish that would like to eat the eggs. So these frogs have their eggs above the water, and then when they hatch, they'll drop into the water, and then the tadpole goes down to the bottom and hides for a little while, and then once it's able to start moving around, then it can feed in the water.
Very cool. And this is probably one of the most terrifying examples of a frog, at least in my opinion. What frog is that over there, and what is on its back?
Well, that's definitely a strange species. That is Suriname toad. We actually have these in our animal attractions exhibit. And what is going on there is that the female of this species lays her eggs, and the male helps her position them on her back, and then those eggs actually sink into the skin of the female's back. So it's really kind of weird. And then a layer of skin will grow over those eggs. And then what comes out are little tiny frogs. There's actually no free swimming tadpole stage for that species. They just come out as little fully formed froglets that kind of burst out of the back of that female, which is really, really strange.
That sounds terrifying to me. Well, frogs, we can agree that frogs are pretty amazing animals, and this one is actually one that you have a lot of experience with. What frog is this?
Yeah, this is Mantella aurantiaca, which is the golden mantella. It's from Madagascar, and this is actually a fairly endangered species that we have here at the Academy. You can see them in the Madagascar floor of the rainforest, but we've been breeding this species for a couple years, and we've been able to actually figure out ways to be very, very successful with this particular species.
Wow. Has anyone heard that word before, endangered? What exactly does that mean, to be an endangered frog? Any ideas? What does it mean to be endangered? Do you have an idea?
I have an idea.
Species numbers are declining. Okay, so there's very few of this frog left. And in fact, it's very important for us to breed endangered species. Why? Why do we want to breed these species? Why should we keep them around?
Well, this particular species is still collected for the pet trade, and in fact, some of the animals that we have here at the Academy were collected for the pet trade. So rather than continuing to collect those animals and not breed them in captivity, which could hurt their wild population, we've been trying to breed them in captivity so that we can not only supply ourselves and make sure that we have really cool exhibit animals for you guys to see and learn about, but also for other institutions as well. We've actually sent out over 100 golden mantellas already, and we'll probably send out another 100 this year.
Wow. So a really good way to reduce our impact on the world around us, especially with some amazing animals like frogs. Well, there's some really cool pictures here of the methods that you use, Brian, to breed this type of frog. What are we looking at in this picture?
So this is actually our breeding setup back of house that we use to get the golden mantellas to lay eggs. This is another one of these really kind of weird frogs that doesn't lay its eggs in water. It actually lays its eggs kind of under moss on the edges of streams and things like that. So one of the biggest challenges with this species is actually finding those egg masses, because they kind of bury them down in the moss and it makes it really difficult to find. And it can be stressful if we have a big group of frogs and we have to get in there and dig around and look for the eggs that may keep the frogs from breeding as well. So what we were able to do is we just, it's pretty simple. We just have these little lake ridge structures. I actually have one right here. We have these little structures that we put in the exhibit, and then we have moss under it, and then we put moss on top of this, and it makes kind of a little moss cave, which is a perfect environment for these frogs to lay their eggs. And it also allows us to just lift this up and see if there's any eggs under it, and that makes it really easy for us to find all of the eggs.
So this is moss that we're looking at, not hash browns?
Yeah, it's moss.
Okay, that's kind of what it looked like to me in the beginning. And then it looks like you have some really cool pictures of the actual eggs that these golden mantellas lay. How many eggs do they lay at one time? Is it thousands, hundreds, 10?
Well, yeah, these guys will lay clutches that are usually about 30 to 60 eggs. And sometimes they'll actually lay large groups. There'll have more than one animal will lay a clutch of eggs next to another one, so they kind of get mixed together. But they're usually about 30 to 60 eggs. And then what we have here, we've just got them set up over water, because when the tadpoles hatch, we want to be able to flush them into the water. And yeah, that's basically what's going on here. And then this is a newly laid clutch of eggs. And then this is a hatching group of tadpoles, and then these are infertile eggs. So there was one clutch laid on top of another, and the bottom one didn't get fertilized. So you see these are the eggs that didn't get fertilized.
And then my favorite picture is actually not this one. It's this one, because we're actually seeing the tadpoles metamorphose into a frog. Has anyone seen this before? This sort of picture of kind of half frog, half tadpole. Yeah, we have a few people. What's going on here? Why do they need to metamorphose to become a frog?
Yeah, so amphibians, most of them have larval stages. The tadpole is the larval stage, or the early life stage of a frog. The tadpoles eat algae and plant matter and diatoms and things like that. And then once they get big enough, they actually come out of the water, and they metamorphose and they turn into frogs. And this is a tadpole that has back legs and also has front legs. So probably in another 2 or 3 days, this guy will look a lot more like what you think about when you think about a frog.
Wow, that happens pretty fast.
Pretty quick with the species, yeah.
Very cool. Well, I'm going to leave this picture up here because I want to know if our audience has any questions for Brian about frogs or about anything we've heard about today. What's your question? Oh, how does the tadpole turn into a frog? Is there some sort of a chemical change in its body? Is it temperature?
Yeah, it's actually very interesting because the tadpole is almost a completely different animal than the frog. Obviously, they're the same species, but they go through what's called metamorphosis, and they completely change everything basically about themselves. They go from being an aquatic animal that's almost a little bit like a fish to being a terrestrial predator. So their stomachs change, their mouth parts change. They get legs, they lose their gills, they get lungs. So there's a lot of changes that happen for a tadpole to become a frog.
Wow, can you guys say that? Metamorphose? Metamorphose? I would like to metamorphose into a dinosaur.
That would be pretty cool.
I think that would be really cool, right? What do you think? Wouldn't that be cool? Metamorphose into a dinosaur? Any other questions for Brian? What do you guys want to know about frogs? Another question right here. What's your question? Speak really loud. Oh, he's going to give you the microphone.
Are you asking a question?
When the tadpole, when the tail does the tail get shorter as
a great question. Yeah, where does the tail go as the frog is changing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So tadpoles, as they metamorphose, the tail actually is absorbed into the body of the little frog. So it kind of helps the frog in that process of metamorphosis. When a tadpole is changing over to a frog, it can't eat because it doesn't have its new mouth parts yet and things like that. So it actually uses that tail as kind of food to fuel the metamorphosis.
Whoa. It almost digests its own tail?
Kind of, yeah.
Wow, that sounds what a great question from our planetarium line right back there. Any other questions for Brian? Oh, right here. Do different species of frogs jump farther than others?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in fact, yes, they do. Some species are able to jump very, very far. Like when we think of like a true frog, like a bullfrog, that type of frog's body style is to really be able to jump very far. But then if you look at an animal like these little rainbow hoppers that we have in the rainforest exhibit, they're little fat frogs with stumpy little legs. Those guys aren't really set up to be able to jump very well. They just don't need to do that very often.
Does anybody know what animal would try to eat a frog? People. A hippo? Do hippos eat frogs?
Hippos usually don't eat frogs. They're, for the most part, vegetarian. But I wouldn't be surprised if it occasionally happened, like if a frog was on a leaf or something. And
Accidental.
It could be an accident, but usually they don't go after those guys.
We'll call that accidental omnivore.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
What else would eat a frog? Snakes? Do snakes eat frogs?
Definitely. Snakes are big predators of frogs.
Very cool. And I understand. So I have one last question before we have our special guests come out. My final question is, if there are frogs that are endangered, if we are trying to breed them here in the Academy, is there anything that we can do, just as me or maybe somebody in our planetarium line or audience members, is there anything we can do to help protect frogs out in the wild?
Yeah, frogs are actually endangered for a large variety of reasons. There's 7,000 different species of frogs and or 7,000 different species of amphibians, and those amphibians are threatened by different things in different places. In some places, they're threatened by encroaching agriculture. So if people are turning the rainforests into croplands and things like that. Also in the United States, we use a lot of agricultural chemicals, so pesticides and things that we use to grow our food. Those things have been shown to have negative impacts on frog populations. And then also there's resource extraction is a big problem too. So if we're mining things like aluminum or nickel, instead of recycling it, then that means that we're oftentimes taking away habitat from frogs. So basically any of the, if you recycle and you try to not use very many chemicals and support organic foods and things like that, you can do a lot to help frogs.
Oh, that sounds pretty easy. Has anyone ever bought organic food before? Okay, quite a few people. So whenever you can, buy organic food, buy local food, so we're not supporting any sort of rainforest destruction, things like that. That sounds pretty easy. Local organic foods help support frogs from around the world. Well, thanks a lot, Brian. We're going to actually bring out some live frogs right now that you guys can get a closer look at. But I wanted to give Brian a big round of applause for joining us. Thanks a lot, Brian, for taking time out of your day.
Everybody.
And if you guys have any additional questions, feel free to come on up. We're going to go off mic now. Come on up and check out these frogs.